7:30. Can you hear me? Yes, great. So I'm Liz Little. I'm the vice president. The president, Larry, is not here tonight. And I just need to say a few things before we get started. Our nominations, I'm going to let you know who's going to be running for leadership, and that will happen actually in May. And so Gail Reynolds will be running for president. I will be vice president again. Mickey Simons will be the secretary. Neil Poppendek, the treasurer. We have 3 members at large that are running again, and that is Randy Morgan, Beth Davis, and Peggy Brenstrader. We have several board members at large that will be returning, but they're not at the end of their term yet. We'll also have our past president for 1 year, Larry Gersbeck, who will be our past president on the board. So that'll be great to have his expertise for a little longer. Okay. Want to introduce our speaker, and that is Grant Sizemore, and he has earned degrees in zoology and environmental science from Miami University and has a master's in wildlife ecology and conservation from the University of Florida. He has worked professionally in wildlife conservation since leaving school and is now the director of invasive species programs for the American Bird Conservancy. So welcome, Grant. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared here. Okay. So everybody can see that, I hope. Thank you very much, Liz, for the introduction. I'm going to talk about everybody's favorite conversation point here. That's domestic cats and what we can do about them. They are a huge challenge for bird conservation, and this is a major program for our organization, for American Bird Conservancy. So let's jump in. So I think it's always helpful for everyone to know the source of the information that they're hearing. And so I want to give you a little more background about American Bird Conservancy. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of native birds and their habitats throughout the Americas. We are really laser focused on achieving results for birds. And as a result, the organization tackles some of the biggest bird conservation challenges across the full annual life cycle. So we're talking about things like habitat preservation and restoration, climate change, endangered species reintroductions. We also work on private lands management and advocacy. Now, our programs and priorities are arranged in this pyramid here for American Bird Conservancy. As you can see, endangered birds are at the top, of course, where they should be. And preventing any additional extinctions is, of course, the primary priority for the organization. But in addition to that, we are trying to keep birds from becoming threatened or endangered, working on a variety of threats that face all birds, really building capacity and trying to bring as many people into bird conservation, working on issues that are important for bird conservation from a variety of different sectors, whether that be wildlife conservation or maybe talking about things like human health or whatever the case may be. So the top anthropogenic threats or threats to all birds in the yellow here that American Bird Conservancy works on include building collisions and collisions with wind turbines, pesticides, fisheries we've worked on and off, and invasive species, including domestic cats. And so that brings us to the Cats Indoors program, which is the program that I run at American Bird Conservancy. So we're going to talk a lot about that Cats Indoors program and basically the foundations for the program and what the program does throughout the rest of this talk. And just as a little aside, Liz already gave a great introduction to me, but I just want to say really it's an honor to speak with you guys today. As a former undergrad from Miami, I got my start birding in Oxford at Miami University under the purview of the great Dave Russell. And it's a pleasure to be able to be back with you, if only virtually today. Oh, and that's my cat, by the way, Amelia Bedelia. So there are a variety of different terms that are used when it comes to cats, domestic cats, management. They're used in and some are misused. And so I want to just make sure we're all on the same page here starting off. So domestic cat is the official name, the common name for the species Felis catus. That is a taxonomic designation. So when we say domestic cat, we really only mean a single species, and it has nothing to do with the behavior of any individual. And then there are these three other terms, free-ranging cat, stray cat, feral cat, which are based on the behavioral classification of individuals. So a free-ranging cat or free-roaming cat or at-large cat is a domestic cat that is that can roam on the landscape without restriction. And it may or may not be an owned cat. And then we have stray cats, which are a category of free-ranging cat, and they are typically habituated to people. And then the opposite of them, those that are not habituated to people, are called feral cats. So cats were first domesticated about 10,000 years ago. Their nearest wild ancestor is the Near Eastern wildcat, and you can see the range of the Near Eastern wildcat here. It's sort of the Middle East, North Africa region. Since that time, domestic cats have been transported across the globe and have been introduced to new environments wherever people have really taken them. And the consequences of those introductions to new ecosystems have been drastic. So a 2016 study found that domestic cats have contributed to the extinction of 63 species in the wild, and that's this graph here on the top right. This level of pressure, this extinction result, accounts for 26% of all extinctions from invasive mammalian predators. I think the most famous example, or before I go into that, I want to just explain this graph here, by the way. The BMR stands for birds, mammals, and reptiles. The red bars are extinct species. The gray bars are threatened and endangered species. And you can see domestic cats are right there at the top. The most famous example of a species that has gone extinct as a result of cat predation is probably the Stevens Island wren, which is pictured here on the left. So this, the story goes that in the 1890s, I want to say like 1894, a lighthouse keeper was hired to live on Stevens Island, work the lighthouse, keep ships from running aground. And he brought with him a cat, allegedly named Tibbles, or maybe it was a couple cats, but regardless, he brought at least a single cat with him to this island, to Stevens Island. And he considered himself a bit of a naturalist. And one day, his cat, which was a free-ranging cat, brought a bird back in its mouth that he wasn't able to identify. So he sent it off to a museum to have it identified. And lo and behold, it was a species that was previously unknown to Western science. Well, then within just a few short years, as a result of his cat and its offspring continuing to roam outdoors, that species was completely wiped off the face of the earth. So it's a very drastic microcosm, I guess, of the impacts that cats have, especially on islands when introduced into novel ecosystems. And the breadth of impacts caused by domestic cats in the environment has led to the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, listing domestic cats among the world's most harmful invasive species. So even when domestic cats are not causing species level extinctions, their predatory impacts really are quite astounding. And there have been a handful of national level estimates of cat-caused wildlife mortality. And so we see in Australia here, the numbers are in the hundreds of millions annually killed by cats for birds and reptiles every single year. In Canada, that number is 200 million birds killed by cats every year. In China, we're into the billions level for birds and mammals. In the United States, this is really the study that kicked all of this off, Loss et al. 2013. They found that every single year in the United States, outdoor cats kill 2.4 billion birds and 12.3 billion mammals. So that's just from these 4 countries, that's 5.1 billion birds lost every single year exclusively by domestic cats. Now, to put that into perspective, because that's a huge number, right, for the United States and for Canada also, but especially for the United States, 2.4 billion birds. To put it into perspective, it is far and away the #1 source of direct human-caused bird mortality in this country. And you can see a comparison here in this graph from the 2014 State of the Birds report that shows the level of cat predation on birds as compared to the other top anthropogenic threats. And of course, this is hugely problematic because, as probably all of you know, birds are in decline in North America. So 1/3 of all North American bird species are in need of urgent conservation action. And Rosenberg et al. 2019 found that in the last 50 years, since 1970, we have lost 2.9 billion birds in the United States and Canada. That is just a staggering decline across basically all different ecosystems, except for waterfowl. Waterfowl are actually doing okay. But other than that, all taxonomic groups of birds are doing very, very poorly and are in decline. And one of the contributing factors, not the only contributing factor, but one of the contributing factors is free-ranging domestic cats. So this magnitude of predation on native wildlife, of course, can have tremendous impacts on individual populations, as well as interactions between species. And so in this example from Hawkins et al. 2004, we see that when researchers compared the presence of various wildlife in habitats with domestic cats and without domestic cats, and this is free-roaming, free-ranging domestic cats, they got very different results. In these graphs, you see that in those ecosystems or in those habitats, those fragments, with cats, you saw a much lower abundance of native rodents, a much higher abundance of exotic rodents, and a much lower abundance of birds. Now, in habitats with cats, we also see an interesting predator-prey dynamic where cats are both predator and prey. And in small fragmented habitats in California, in this Crooks and Soule 1999 study, they observed that there were few coyotes, lots of cats, and few native birds in highly fragmented habitats, so very small habitats. They wouldn't support coyotes, and thus it allowed for cats to build up and a loss of birds. But where you had habitats that were less fragmented and more intact, you actually got more coyotes, which then depredated cats, and allowed for birds to persist in the environment. But when those coyotes were absent, when the fragmented habitats were very small and cats were present, we actually saw extirpations in birds in that habitat type. Now, these impacts by cats are not even necessarily tied to successful predation events. As it turns out, the mere presence of a cat in the environment is actually enough to sufficiently modify the behavior of certain species to affect survival. Bonington et al. In 2013 published this study, Fearing the Feline, Domestic Cats Can Reduce Avian, really long title. And they found that, well, their study placed a model of a domestic cat near a common blackbird nest. So they did this in the UK. They placed a model of a cat near a nest for 15 minutes, then removed the model and observed the common blackbird nest for a 90-minute period. And what they found was that the presence of a cat in the environment resulted in a reduction in the amount of food provided to young in the nest by 1/3 and an increased likelihood of nest predation by an order of magnitude. So even when a cat is not actively hunting or killing native wildlife, its mere presence can result in reduced reproductive success. So, at this point, some cat owners might be tempted to say, well, my cat isn't part of the problem. Sure, I let it out, but I've only ever seen it kill, 1 or 2 birds here and there. And certainly the proclivity of domestic cats, of individual cats to hunt can vary, but the science indicates that your cat is likely having a far larger impact than you were actually aware of. So this study on the left, this image with a cat with a camera, well, with a little blue thing, is what the researchers called a kitty cam. It's a little camera. Did this in partnership with National Geographic. It was a bunch of owned cats that were allowed outdoor access. These were well-fed cats. The camera was placed on their collar and it observed what cats got up to when they left the house. And some cats hunted, some of them didn't, but many cats hunted. And that was really not very surprising. What was surprising was the number of prey that were killed by these cats that were not returned to the home. So what they found was that only 23% of prey items that were killed by these owned free-ranging domestic cats were returned to the home. So this is really important because one, many of the studies that had previously estimated cat-caused predation on wildlife had used prey returns to the home as an indicator of total cat impacts. And now we know that it was very likely underestimating total impacts. And also from a cat owner's perspective, they're very likely to seriously underestimate the total impact that their cat is having in the environment because they only see 1/5, 1/4 of the prey that are actually killed by cats. Now, I also want to draw your attention to this study on the top right. McRuer et al. Published a study that looked at cat-caused intake at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. And one of the interesting things from their study was that even when prey were not directly killed by a cat, so let's say you find a bird that's been attacked by a cat, you say, oh no, we don't like that. We take it to the Wildlife Rehab Center and you get it some professional help. Even with that professional help, and like the latest cutting edge, this is a very high tech, one of the leading wildlife rehab facilities in the country. Even with their intervention, 81% of all birds brought in as a result of cat attack died. So, when somebody says, well, my cat was just playing with it and just batting it around, it didn't actually kill it, it's very likely that that bird or other wildlife actually would have succumbed to its wounds. And part of the reason here is that cats have a lot of bacteria in their mouths, and their teeth are really sharp. So unlike dogs, which will bite and they have a really superficial bite, cats have these puncturing teeth that will, get right down through the tissues, and that that penetrates through and deposits that saliva, that bacteria-laden saliva, deep into the tissues of the prey item, and frequently results in infection and death. Okay, I'm going to show a brief video here that hopefully should work. And this is about another study that was looking at the ecological impacts of, there's this hyperbolic, perhaps, headline here, killer cats, but a comparison between domestic cats as a predator and native cats that also are predators in their respective environments.
Today we publish new research showing that pet cats kill 2 to 10 times more wildlife than the equivalent wild predator. Here we're going to show you how we figured this out and what it means for conservation. A few years ago, researchers estimated that cats in North America kill 10 billion birds and mammals each year. Now that's a really terrifying number, but the more we thought about it, the more we kind of wondered, well, so what? We wanted to know, do pet cats and wild predators have the same ecological impact on prey populations?
To compare the impact of pet cats with their wild equivalents, we needed 2 types of data. How much prey does a cat kill? And what's the range over which it hunts?
We wanted to get a global perspective on this, so we teamed with scientists to distribute GPS tracking devices all around the world, making this one of the largest tracking studies ever.
Pet cats are normally hanging around their home and yard and sometimes going into the neighborhood. Younger cats and those living in rural areas had slightly larger home ranges, but on average, pet cats across the world had very small home ranges of 3.6 hectares, usually sticking to within 100 meters of their house.
Reports on how much prey cats brought home varied quite a bit. Some real active hunters brought home on average 11.6 prey per month, while other, more lackadaisical cats were more around 4.25 prey per month.
Of course, we know cats don't bring home everything they kill. Those numbers have an adjustment factor that accounts for prey left behind or consumed.
Next, we need the same information on a wild predator. We found a great study on the mice per month. However, these jungle cats capture these prey items by hunting over a range of 605 hectares, 200 times the size of the hunting territory of the pet cats we tracked.
So we estimated jungle cats kill 0.6 prey per hectare per month. Based on the data we collected on pet cats across the world, we estimate the lazy hunter would kill 1.2 prey animals per hectare per month, while an active hunter would kill 3.2. This means that pets can have an ecological
because pet cats live at twice the maximum density we would expect for any wild predator, and that's going to amplify their ecological impact so that the total impact is 4 to 10 times what we would expect for any wild predator. Our research shows that pet cats can have an extraordinarily large impact on prey populations, but that this is mostly localized near their houses. The easiest thing we can do to counteract this and help protect wildlife is to keep our cats indoors.
If you want to learn more about our study and see some of the GPS tracks from our past participants, check out cattracker.org.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear all of that. Basically, the takeaway, I think, from that study is that domestic cats have really localized but concentrated, because of the large number of cats roaming the landscape, concentrated impacts that are far greater on local wildlife than similarly sized native predators. So just as a quick review here, in a non-native invasive species that's been introduced to new environments around the globe. And as a consequence of those introductions, they have had tremendous negative impacts on species populations up to and including the extinction of entire species. They continue to kill large numbers of wildlife, and of course these are concerning because in addition to all the other negative impacts that humans are having on the environment, cats are, I guess, another nail in the coffin, so to speak. And the role of cats in the environment is sufficient to actually modify the functioning of ecosystems, change predator-prey dynamics, and can have long-lasting effects in the habitats in which they've been introduced. So we're going to change gears here a little bit from the role of cats as an introduced predator in the environment, something we're probably all a little more familiar with. We think of cats as predators. Now we're going to talk about the role of domestic cats in the spread of pathogens in the environment. So this is a table from Lepchik et al. 2015, which illustrates the large number of pathogens, many of which are zoonotic, that is, they can be, that domestic cats can carry. I'm not going to talk about all of these, it's a lot, but it's got some crazy stuff in it, like plague, tularemia, cat scratch disease, which a lot of people actually, I've heard over the years, didn't realize was a real thing. But no, it's a real disease. I'm going to talk about these two, rabies and toxoplasmosis. So you're probably all pretty familiar with rabies. You've seen Old Yeller maybe, but in brief, rabies is a viral zoonosis the world. About 60,000 people die from rabies every year. So, and plus it's one of the crazy things about rabies is once symptoms arise, it is virtually 100% fatal. It's like 99% fatal once symptoms arise. So you want to do everything in your power to prevent those symptoms from arising.